Your Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for returning to the hall promptly. Those of you who aren't able to make it into the hall, we do have a spillover room with full feed of what is going on in this main hall. We have 460 delegates here from some 30 countries. We're doing our best to get everybody in the room, and it's understandable why the room should be packed for this session, as it was for our opening dinner addressed by President al-Sisi of Egypt, and our first plenary where, as you all saw, we had excellent presentations from U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken and the Foreign Minister of our host country, His Excellency Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed. This plenary 2 of the 11th IISS Manama Dialogue is on the theme, the region after the nuclear negotiations, and it was a subject that was raised several times by both speakers and questioners in our first plenary, and we have a chance in the next 90 minutes fully to explore this complex question of how the region's stability is improved or potentially in some way confused or complicated by the way in which recent discussions and negotiations have proceeded. We're really honored to have the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with us. Many of you will, of course, know that he was extraordinarily busy with other foreign ministers in Vienna yesterday. He arrived today in the Kingdom of Bahrain at 3 a.m. We praise his energy and commitment to this Manama Dialogue by his presence here, and it's a real honor and tribute to the Manama Dialogue also to have the Secretary General of the League of Arab States with us, Nabil El-Arabi. I might just preface my introduction to the distinguished Minister from Saudi Arabia, who you all know very well and who had an extraordinarily successful career, one might also say, as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Washington, by reminding you what the former Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia said to this Manama Dialogue 11 years ago about stability in the region, when I asked His Royal Highness Prince Saud Al Faisal, what do you think, Your Royal Highness, are the key elements for stability in this Gulf region? And I recall vividly his very concise and typically analytically elegant reply. He said the 4 elements for stability in this Gulf region are these: a unified GCC, an integrating Yemen, a stable Iraq, and a friendly Iran. We might conclude that not any one of those elements are fully met at present, which is why there is perhaps as much strategic unease in the region as we now feel. But it is a strategic unease that is being alleviated, we hope, by a very vigorous international diplomacy at present. Minister Jubair is at the center of that diplomacy, so it is with great pleasure that I invite him to take the podium and address this plenary on the region after the nuclear negotiations. Minister Jubair, thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I want to thank my brother Sheikh Khalid for the kind invitation to address this dialogue, and I also want to thank John for the kind introduction. The topic is the region after the nuclear agreement, and I think what I would like to start out with is that the region is the same. The challenges that the region faces, the dangers that the region faces, the opportunities that the region faces all remain the same. The nuclear agreement that was made between the P5+1 countries and Iran takes one issue off the table for the time being, and we will see how it unfolds. We welcome the agreement as an opportunity or as a means to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear capability, to subject Iran to intrusive and continuous inspections of its nuclear program, its nuclear activities, and its enrichment program, as well as its mining and milling and production of uranium. So in that sense, it's a positive. What we are not aware of yet is whether this agreement will be an opportunity for Iran to reintegrate itself into the region, that Iran will be able to play a productive and constructive role in the region as a consequence of the lifting of most of the sanctions, or whether Iran will use the additional income in order to finance and to fund its aggressive policies, which it has pursued for the past 30 years. So the jury is out. We know that Iran faces tremendous domestic challenges in terms of infrastructure, need to invest to upgrade its oil industry, and other issues of concern that will cost Iran several $100 billion. And we hope that Iran will use the proceeds it will be receiving from the lifting of the sanctions in order to address some of its infrastructure challenges and developmental challenges rather than finance some of its aggressive policies, as I mentioned earlier. So the jury is still out. We hope that Iran will use this opportunity to become a member of this region in good standing and become a force for good rather than an aggressive power. But we don't know yet. It's too early. So that's with regards to the agreements and the concerns about Iran. The challenges to our region, irrespective of the nuclear agreement, have to do mainly with four themes: Syria, Iraq, Yemen, terrorism. And the opportunities in our region have to do with three: economic development and investment, youth, technology. And I believe that the four drivers for stability in the region that the late Prince Saud mentioned, a unified GCC and integrating Iran, a stable Iraq, and a friendly Iran still remain, I believe, and they will remain with us for some time to come. The challenges that we have with regards to Syria have to do with a war that has resulted in the death of more than 360,000 innocent Syrian people, the displacement of 12 million Syrian nationals, almost half the country, and the destruction of one of the richest Arab countries. And so the issue has to do with a change in the leadership in Syria, the writing of a new constitution and new elections so Syria can move towards a better future without any role for Bashar al-Assad. This is the objective as we see it and as the international community sees it, and as it is embodied in the Geneva I principles. We have recently concluded a meeting after a series of other meetings in Vienna that involved the P5 countries plus most of the regional players. With regards to Syria, we have not been able to reach agreement. There was an agreement reached on a number of issues with regards to the importance of maintaining Syria's territorial integrity and unity, with regard to what a new Syria should look like, a democratic state in which all ethnic and religious groups and minorities enjoy protection and rights, a Syria that has a new constitution and new elections based on the Geneva I principles, and a Syria that is part of the region. There was a commitment expressed by the participants, including Iran, that access should be provided for humanitarian assistance to Syria, that we will work towards a new system in Syria. But where there were disagreements, they had to do with the two most fundamental issues. The first has to do with the timing of the departure of Bashar al-Assad. There was no agreement reached. And the second one has to do with the timing and the means of the withdrawal of foreign forces from Syria, in particular Iranian forces, which incidentally we view as an occupying force. So the decision was made in Vienna that some progress has been made that is optimistic, but not enough in order to realistically say we can resolve this issue. And so the decision was made that there would be another meeting held within 2 weeks to see if we cannot find a resolution to those two outstanding issues. In the meantime, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and its allies have made it very clear that we will continue to support the moderate Syrian opposition, and that Our policy regarding Syria has not changed, and to put it simply, it's the implementation of the Geneva I principles, the establishment of an interim governing council which would lead the country towards a new future, draft a constitution and hold elections, and then establish a new Syria in which Bashar al-Assad has absolutely no role. This is the first part of our policy. The second part of our policy has to do with a Syria in which no foreign forces exist, and particularly Iranian forces. And until that is achieved, I think the Syrian crisis will continue. The second challenge, Iraq, we are very supportive of the efforts of the Abadi government to implement the reforms agreed to last summer in order to provide for an inclusive Iraq in which all of its ethnic and religious groups enjoy protection and have a say in the decision-making of the country. The Iraqis have encountered tremendous challenges in doing so, but they are making progress, and we are very supportive of those efforts. We believe that with regards to Syria and Iraq, when it comes to Daesh, that the two white elephants in the room are Bashar al-Assad and the reforms in Iraq. So long as Bashar al-Assad is in power, he will act as a magnet to attract foreign fighters who join Daesh. And any attempt to go after Daesh in Syria without dealing with the root cause, which is Bashar al-Assad, are doomed to fail. And in Iraq, the issue of Daesh is linked to the reforms. Once those reforms are implemented, the fertile ground in which Daesh operates in Iraq will no longer exist, and they will become a terrorist organization, and it will be easier to mobilize the country in order to destroy them. And this is what we have been advocating, and I believe that the consensus view is moving in that direction. With regard to Yemen, the bright picture in Yemen is that the forces supporting the legitimate government and the forces of the legitimate government have reclaimed most of the country. The Yemeni government has been able to open up most of its ports for humanitarian assistance, so this is helping alleviate the tremendous humanitarian challenges that Yemen faces. The Houthis and the forces of Ali Abdullah Saleh have accepted UN Security Council Resolution 2216 and have agreed to enter into peace talks with the Yemeni government, which also is a hopeful sign in Yemen, we hope, and we support this process. We expect that there will be some bumps on the road, but I would say, and I'm an optimist by nature, that the Yemeni conflict, God willing, has entered its final phase. And we look forward to a stable Yemen and a prosperous Yemen. The issue of terrorism in general, I think, is linked to the failed states or failing states in the region. We see it in Syria, we see it in Libya, Yemen, and so the imperative upon decision makers is to work towards stabilizing those states, establishing institutions in those states, and providing for economic growth in those states so that people have opportunities and we have stability and we eliminate the ground in which terrorism, in particular Daesh and Al-Qaeda, can thrive. So that's with regards to the challenges. But as I mentioned, I'm an optimist by nature, and I see tremendous opportunities in our region, in particular in the Gulf region. And the opportunities have to do with economics. The countries of the region have high incomes, large financial reserves, first-rate infrastructure, stable governments, dynamic entrepreneurs and businesses, and they have a lot of young people who are very well connected to the world. In fact, some of the highest social media participation rates, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, are Gulf nationals, are young, are educated all over the world. They're connected with the world. They're energetic. They're enterprising, and they will be the energy that drives our region and our countries to greater heights. So I'm very optimistic about that. I think the technology that's available, combined with the financial resources of the Gulf, stable governments, great infrastructure, entrepreneurship, all the ingredients for success exist. And there is a recognition among the leaderships of all the Gulf countries that We have to unleash the potential of our youth, and we have to do so by essentially getting out of the way in terms of streamlining our economic laws and financial laws, having more free market enterprises, less government in the regulation in the marketplace, so that private entrepreneurship can take off, create jobs, and in turn create wealth and create stability. So I'm very optimistic about this. We believe that the challenges that we face are solvable. There is no problem that cannot be resolved, and we are committed, all of us in the Gulf countries, to work towards achieving those objectives. So I would say anybody who bets against the GCC is likely to lose, and my recommendation would be to bet on it, not against it. So with those words, I don't want to take too much time talking to you. I'd rather answer your questions, and thank you very much for having me. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for those strategic reflections and also for that full report on the meetings you just had in Vienna. You will have inspired a lot of questions and comments from the floor. So thank you very much for your remarks. Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it last year, but I will try to make up this year. I have been asked to address, first of all, the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal. And as many have already said, it has positive aspects, but I'm going to address what I consider passive aspects. Mainly, it's important that all countries in the world join the NPT and the Non-Proliferation Treaty and will abide by its provisions. That's a very important aspect of it. Regrettably, the NPT, which was supposed to be a universal treaty, all countries in the world will come in. The only exception was given to those countries who have exploded nuclear power prior to the entry into force of the treaty. That was, the time limit was 1968. Regrettably, what we see now is that there are other powers which managed to have nuclear weapons surreptitiously, and the international community has done nothing about it. I particularly refer to Israel. On this point, both Iran and all the Arab countries have been trying for a very long time. In point of fact, it was Iran which started the process to have a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East in 1974. Egypt joined, then all the other countries joined. Up till now, we do not have this. And that is why I'm very much surprised that the Iran deal did not cover the whole Middle East and address the need to supervise what Israel is doing. This is a very negative point from the point of view of the Arab countries. The other negative view was that it is well known that as Foreign Minister Al-Jubeir has made it very clear, and I believe everyone realizes that Iran has certain interventions taking place in many parts of the Arab world. And suffice to refer to Syria. And yet, the Iran deal did not have one component saying that the country that's going to be recognized and helped and sanctions will be lifted should limit its intervention in many parts of the Arab world. I believe this is a negative point. What I would like to address now is Palestine. Secretary Blinken said something that I take issue with. I don't know whether he's here or not. Namely, that you cannot, he said 2 points as a matter of fact that I take issue with. First, that you cannot attribute all the problems in the region to the existence of Israel or to the actions of Israel. Well, this is partly true, but many of the reasons that you find youth throughout the Middle East feel that they have been prosecuted, that they have not had fair treatment by the international world emanates from what's happening to the Palestinians by Israel. The second point that he made, which I also take issue with, that he said when he asked if the United States can help more or something like that, his answer was they cannot do more than the parties. Here, not because I'm the Secretary General of the Arab League or that I'm Egyptian, but it's a fact. You cannot treat the Israel and the Palestinians as two parties here, because it's not a fair negotiation that you can do whatever you want to do. It's a certain obligation entered into by the international community concerning the situation in Palestine, which should have been implemented, not the question of negotiations. It's one country occupying territories belonging to another people, which both of them were, let's say, created by a single resolution which said one Arab state and one Jewish state. It was a single resolution. It's unfair in the distribution of the territory because the majority were Palestinian and they got only 44% of the territory, while the Jews who have just come from other parts of the world were given 54. But let's leave that aside and look at what the Palestinians are asking now for is only 22% of Palestine. 22% of Palestine. The Israelis have an obligation to withdraw, not to negotiate, to withdraw according to certain conditions laid down by Resolution 242. And also, the Israelis signed with Egypt in the peace treaty that and Camp David and then the peace treaty, that the same principles concerning the application of this Resolution 242 will apply to all other Arab countries. So, and then there are a pack of documents, resolutions, treaties, agreements signed between Palestine and Israel throughout the last 20 years. So it's not a question of two sides, two countries are negotiating something. It's a legal question of one country has to carry out its own obligations, its own commitments, its own undertakings, which is not taking place. Now, what we see is that in Palestine, the settlements are encroaching on the territory, and after a while, even the 22% would not be available to cede or to withdraw from and give to the Palestinians. And this is a very serious matter. And here, time is of the essence. I beg to explain to you that the only country in the world which the time factor is considered of strategic importance is Israel. Every country in the world has strategic objectives, and time will be judged upon according to these strategic objectives. And Israel is the country. They want more time regardless of what is the issue. And then on this more time, they intend to create new facts and face the world with these facts. I said, we cannot do otherwise. Look, there are people living there. There are people their families are being growing families. They have children. How can we do that? We need to build settlements here. Well, it has been very clear in all Security Council resolutions that settlements are illegal, are against the international law. The International Court of Justice has issued its famous 2004 advisory opinion confirming that. And yes, it is an advisory opinion, but it's based on legal documents which are applicable to all countries in the world. So this is the point which has to be taken care when we are speaking about Palestine. I'm not going to discuss all what's going on now in Al-Aqsa Mosque, because I think everyone realizes what's going on now. It's a question, as has been said this morning, 1/3 of the population of this world are offended and cannot accept what's being done in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and regrettably, no one is doing anything. At present, I hate to say it, but the Palestinians are only looking at protection. The question of ending the conflict is not on the table. They are entitled to protection. the Secretariat of the United Nations issued a very important document on the 21st of October this year, a few days ago, about samples of protection that have been extended by the United Nations. So what is needed now really is to collect something from this. Just to give two examples, in 1994, when a settler killed 26 or 27 persons in a mosque in Hebron, the Security Council issued a resolution to provide some form of protection through presence in that area. At least this precedent should be built upon, and to try to find something now for the protection of the Palestinians. As I said, it's not enough. The foreign ministers 3 years ago in November 2012, Arab foreign minister, adopted a very important resolution, really. They said they are fed up with the question, with what's going on in the international community by trying to manage a conflict. Territories occupied in 1967, you cannot go on forever managing this conflict. You have to end it. This important decision was put to the 5 permanent members, including US, Russia, and all the others, and they all accepted. And on that basis, the Arab Summit sent a delegation of 12 or 14, I think, countries, including, at that time, Ambassador Joubert did attend that meeting on the 29th of April 2013. In that meeting, Secretary Kerry made it very clear that the United States endorses the point of view of the Arab countries to end the conflict and not to continue managing it. And that was to end it in 6 months at that time. It was extended for 3 months later. Moreover, Vice President Biden came and read a piece of paper representing the point of view of the administration to that effect. Regrettably, as we all know, everything, I will not say collapsed, but everything came to a standstill in April of last year. Now, it is the responsibility of the international community, foremost the United States, but it is the responsibility of the international community to end this conflict. It cannot go on forever. When I speak about the whole world that has a responsibility here, I refer to the Security Council, which I will address in a few moments. I now give some comments on Syria. In March 2011, some peaceful demonstrations in a city in South Syria took place, similar to what's going on in other Arab countries. People going to the streets, calling for democracy, calling for social justice, calling for freedom. They were shot at, and many of them were thrown into jail. This Arab Spring, which Tunisia started, was something that many in the Arab world thought that it's about time. It's about time that democracy and social justice will take place throughout the Arab world by peaceful means. No one thought at that time that armed forces should be used. Regrettably, in Syria, they used arms. I had a chance to visit with the senior leadership at that time for three times, yes. The third time was with a group of, again, about 14 foreign ministers, headed by a prime minister. Our request to the Syrian leadership was as follows. 1, fighting has to stop. 2, at that time, the tens of thousands of political prisoners should be released. And third, and most important, that genuine and meaningful political reforms have to take place. All the requests were refused. After that, the League of Arab States tried through various means, including sending observers, which took place in record time in 16 cities. And I tend to believe that had this continued, things might have changed. But anyhow, it was not possible at that time for various reasons, which I'm not going to get into. And we withdrew that. Then a very important meeting took place between the foreign minister, and it was decided that the League of Arab States as a regional organization have reached the limit to what it can do, and the matter should be sent to the Security Council. Security Council received this letter on the 22nd of January 2012. It's still there. The request is still there. Twice attempts were made to get a Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire, and the Security Council resolution was vetoed twice in the spring of 2013. Had this happened and ceasefire resolution been adopted, maybe 250,000 people would have not have died. Regrettably, that was not the case. And what we have now is something of a complete abandonment by the Security Council, apart from some speeches will be made here and there, of the responsibility to stop the fighting and to save innocent lives. At this point, I will address the collective security system of the United Nations, because when it comes to the Arab world, we find in Palestine a stream of resolutions for over 40 years have been adopted, some of them unanimously adopted, and yet we do not get any implementation. In Syria, 250,000 died. Everyone agrees it's the worst humanitarian crisis in the 21st century. Definitely more than half the country destroyed. 13 million between refugees and displaced. And the Security Council has not issued one single resolution calling for stopping the fighting, and ceasefire and stopping the fighting. If we go back to the annals of the United Nations, you'll find that practically in every conflict, when the victims will reach certain stage, some 100 or something like that, Security Council intervenes. Here, no. That is why we need to look at the collective security system of the United Nations. Some reason that it's not working, it's easy to say, well, it's a veto. It definitely is a veto, and this has to be looked at. And I have some ideas, but I don't think I have all the time. Maybe I'll circulate a paper on that. But it's much more than that, just the veto. I think that the best thing I read about the utter failure of the Security Council is a report, and excuse me to say, issued in 1969 by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and I'll read some parts of it.
Bill, I know you have a very important policy proposition to make to us for us to debate. Perhaps you can make that, and then we can fully debate it. Thank you.
Yes. And just that what is needed now, I would have liked to precede that by something else. But what is needed now really is to look at the whole collective security system of the United Nations, and that is through not piecemeal approach, try to do something here or there, but overall, and that is to follow the provisions of Article 109 of the Charter of the United Nations, which says, paragraph 3, that what is needed is a conference to review the whole Charter concepts, and that it was made very clear that if no such conference to review the Charter and the concept of the Charter, and to see whether they can the blueprint of 1945 is relevant and applicable in the 21st century, is to have the conference referred to in Article 109 of the Charter. The Charter itself says within 10 years, I must say that the founding fathers of the United Nations had vision, and they knew that things change, that concepts change, that the situation change, that the military power would change, and they called for a conference. If no one asked for the conference in 10 years, it will be put in the agenda, inscribed in the agenda of the General Assembly. Well, now it's 70 years, and I believe it's important now if the ISS would issue some kind of a call, a recommendation that it's time to review the Charter of the United Nations in a comprehensive manner. In a comprehensive manner that would cover all the concepts and the mechanism in the Charter, with particular emphasis on the collective security system, which in many parts of the world has not worked. Thank you very much.
Shukran jazilan. Thank you very much, Dr. General. Thank you very much for that really vital reminder that the security of this region cannot be disconnected from the security of the world as a whole, and that therefore the broader collective security systems have to be reformed in order to be able to be effective in this as in other regions. You've issued a strong challenge to the IISS, and as always we will try to rise to it. We have about 8 interventions already. Let me remind you that you put your card in with the chip facing towards you, press the button, your green light will go on. Don't be alarmed. That does not mean your microphone is yet on. It does mean that you're in the queue, that I will recognize you, and then when I do, your microphone will be on, and when you finish your question, we'll be able to turn it off. So the first question from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, from Dr. Abdulaziz Sagar. Your microphone is on.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. My question is to His Excellency, Mr. Adel Jubair, but I'll say the question in Arabic and perhaps he will answer in English.
You previously said that Assad has to go. Is there a timeline that the kingdom and its alliance would like to see? Do you have a conception of the type of regime that was called for in the Geneva I conference? And given the current situation, do you think the transition should be a military body representative of all parties? You already said that we need a political solution, but there are alternatives. To what extent is the kingdom accepting of these alternatives? Will the opposition be able to take part in that? How do you see the call of Assad to Russia and the meeting with Putin, where the country is considered invading Syria? And how do you understand the Omani minister visit to Assad? Is this preparing for the period or coming later and in preparation of the transition? The German ambassador met with Saudis, and he was looking at the rapprochement between Saudi and Iran. What do you think about all of that?
So that the minister is able to find the coherent themes and answer them all. But I do want to get a different voices in. Your neighbor from Germany, Boris Ruger, now has the floor.
Thank you very much, John. Question to Foreign Minister Al-Jubair also. First of all, thank you, Excellency, for making the extra effort to be here. And on Vienna, obviously in Vienna, Iran and Russia were faced with a large number of governments, all of whom believe that Bashar al-Assad must leave at an identifiable point early in the process. Do you think that made an impact on the Russians and the Iranians? And second, before going to Vienna, you said that Vienna was also a test of Iranian and Russian seriousness. Do you feel that after this first meeting, there are signs of seriousness on the part of the Russians and the Iranians?
And from the BBC, Frank Gardner.
Thank you. Frank Gardner, BBC security correspondent. My question is to His Excellency Nabil Al-Arabi. Back in 2011, the Arab League asked for international military intervention in Libya. Do you regret that now?
And from the United States, Jed Snyder.
Thank you, John. Minister Al-Jubair, you began your comments by saying that you felt the regime, or the region rather, was the same, but you acknowledged that the jury was still out regarding Iran's potential responses to the nuclear agreement. There's been a lot of speculation and even some analysis, however, that this is a new era for the GCC and for its defense strategy. and the analysis goes all the way from suggesting real upgrades to defense capabilities to the possibility of Arab interest long-term in a nuclear program of its own. Could you say a little bit about what the Saudi view is on whether the environment for defense strategy is the same, and if not, what changes do you anticipate the Saudis leading or supporting?
And shortly to join the IISS is Senior Fellow for Political Islamism, Dr. Nelly Lahoud, now at West Point.
Thank you. My question is to both speakers who both touched on the problem of terrorism, and particularly as it relates to the youth in the Arab world. Now, of course, the appeal of Daesh is really not limited to Muslim majority states or to the Arab world. The Europeans, as well as the US, are also facing the challenge of their citizens joining Daesh. But it is also the case that the number in the US or in Europe is not as high as it is in the Arab world. Perhaps that is because young people in the West can unleash their anger, perhaps even their radicalism, through the political process. Those of us who study terrorism realize that the question is not only, the cause is not only in unemployment. We see people who are rich and who are actually engaged in terrorism and funding terrorism. It is sometimes also about political participation. How do you propose dealing with the question of political participation as it relates to the young people?
I have about 16 more interventions, so I'll ask Adil Jubair to answer the 4 or 5 questions that have been addressed to him, and then the one to Nabil Al-Arabi, and then we'll come back for a new round. Minister.
Let me see if I tried to take some notes. Hopefully I covered all of them. With regards to the first question by Dr. Abdelaziz on the timing of the departure of Bashar al-Assad, ideally he should leave this afternoon. So the sooner the better. The sooner we can move towards a new Syria and rebuilding of Syria. With regards to the interim governing council, the idea is to ensure that the departure of Assad does not lead to the collapse of state institutions, whether civil or military, so that we avoid a vacuum and a void in Syria. And so the thinking behind it in Geneva was that this governing council would be composed of members of the opposition as well as members of the existing government, so that we have hopefully a more seamless transition. Whether it has a military component or not is really up to the Syrian people. I'm not an expert in how you manage these things. But the thinking behind it is that it should be representative of all Syrians. With regards to options, should the political process fail, we have mentioned what those options are. The support for the Syrian opposition, the moderate Syrian opposition, will consider and intensify. With regards to the type of weapons that are being provided to them, I can only say that the idea is to provide the more lethal weapons without getting into details, as I'm sure you will understand. The visit of Bashar al-Assad to Russia was interesting because he was summoned by President Putin, and we've heard some reports about the visit, and we're trying to learn more of it. Our hope is that the Russians use the opportunity to persuade Bashar al-Assad that it is time for a political transition after having sent their forces into Syria to protect him. The visit of our Omani colleague to Syria is something you should address to our Omani colleague. As I mentioned previously, we have no doubt in the motives of Oman or any of the Gulf countries, and we're certain that it was driven by a desire to try to find common ground or to try to expand communications or contact with Bashar al-Assad in order to achieve what is best for Syria. The other one is with regards to the German foreign minister's comments and the need to have better ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We completely agree. We want to have the best bilateral relations we can possibly have with Iran. Iran is a large country, it is an Islamic country, it is a neighbor. Instability in Iran affects stability in the Gulf. We have had good relations with Iran prior to the Iranian Revolution. The reason our relations with Iran are not as good as they should be is because of the policies that Iran has been pursuing towards the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, and the region in general. It is Iran's interventions in the affairs of Arab countries, whether it's Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, whether it's Iranian attempts to destabilize or to smuggle weapons into Bahrain, or for that matter, Saudi Arabia. This is what's driving the negativity in the relationship between our two countries, and it's emanating from the East, not from the West. You don't see Arab countries interfering in Iran's domestic affairs or trying to destabilize Iran or trying to cause problems for Iran or pursuing aggressive policies towards Iran. And so we have made this point time and time again that we want the best possible relations with Iran. We have extended our hand in friendship to Iran. We continue to do so. And it is up to the Iranians whether they want to have relations with us that are based on good neighborliness, that are based on open and frank and productive exchanges, that are based on ties that benefit both sides, or if they want to have relations that are filled with tension. That's on Iran. The other question from our German colleague with regards to Vienna, there were more than just Iran and Russia that shared the same position at the talks. And I believe that the importance of the meeting was that it was scheduled for 2 or 2.5 hours, and it lasted almost 9 hours. Everything you can possibly think of was discussed in a closed room. It was very, very frank, and I think no holds were barred in the talks. I thought in that sense, they were productive in terms of putting everything on the table for people to discuss. The importance of the meeting, I believe, was in separating now the issues that are resolvable or where there is common ground, such as the importance of maintaining serious territorial integrity, the importance of working towards a democratic Syria with protection for all of its minorities, the importance of allowing unfettered access to humanitarian assistance, and things of that nature, the importance of having a transition, governing council, new constitution, new elections. All of these issues are now, I believe, off the table in terms of discussions, and now we have narrowed it down to the two most essential and most important points: the timing and departure of Bashar al-Assad, and the timing and departure of foreign forces from Syria. So that should make the next meeting, I would expect, much more focused, and we will see if it works or not. With regards to testing Iran's intentions, it was really more with regards to Syria. With regards to Syria, it's Iran and Russia's intentions. With regards to Yemen, it's Iranian intentions, because Russia has been supportive to an extent. It has not opposed the UN Security Council Resolution 2216. It really is Iran that's driving, or was driving, the Houthi issue in Yemen. And I think we still look at it as a sign of Iran's intentions, and I think it'll be some time. I don't think it'll be a long time, but it'll be some time before it is established whether Iran, after having signed the new agreement with the P5+1 countries, will change or amend its policies and move them from policies of conflict and confrontation to politics of cooperation. And we hope that it will be the latter. I believe the next question was about youth and terrorism in the Arab world. I think Daesh is a cult. It is not a religious movement. I think individuals who are unbalanced and unstable go to fight there. I think what we have found is the Saudis who have gone to Syria, there are three types of person. One is idealistic. They see innocent people being slaughtered and they want to go and help. That's one part, and I think those individuals are redeemable. The second part, they go and they find that it's not quite what they thought it was, and they come back. The second group are people who believe that they're on a religious mission, that they want to go and fight a sectarian war, and so that's the second group. And the third group tends to be what I call the people who are lost and they want to belong to a cause or a cult, and so they want to go and atone for their sins. And this applies to people across nationalities. That's the third group that we find. If we look at the terrorists who committed the crimes in France, they were not religious. They were in and out of jails the whole time. But they thought that by engaging in this act, they can atone for their sins. So that's the type of individual that we work with. I think one of the practical reasons why you have more people from the Arab and Muslim world is because there are more Muslims in the Arab and Muslim world than there are in Europe. But if you look at countries like over 2,000 have come from Russia to fight in Syria. That's roughly, Russia's Muslim population is slightly smaller than the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's population. If you look at the number of people from Great Britain who've come to fight with Daesh, and you look at the size of the Muslim population in Great Britain, it's not that much larger than some of the smaller Islamic countries. So I think I wouldn't break it down by Arab world versus Europe. In Europe, they have freedom of expression, they have freedom of religion, they don't have any segregation of the genders, they have lots of opportunities for recreation, they have, and yet people go and join Daesh. And so there is another reason, besides the socio-economic reasons. There are, I think the reasons, a lot of it is psychological, and we need to find a way to study it and find a way to counter the mindset that causes somebody to leave. I was informed by an Italian colleague that Daesh was able to recruit a Catholic woman in Italy, young lady, convert her to Islam and send her to Syria within 3 months, all through the internet. And so you ask yourself, how can they do this? What is it that makes them so appealing? And what psychological chords do they touch that cause people to react in this way? And we need to find a way to undo this. And I think that it's not I think, I know, I have no doubt that ultimately we will find a way to push back. At the end of the day, governments have a lot more resources than these movements, and governments have a lot more capabilities, not just capabilities financial or military, but even intellectual capabilities. Governments have access to think tanks and research institutions that an organization like Daesh does not have. And so we will find a way to deal with this, and we will reverse this in time, God willing. Thank you.
A question was addressed to me. Do you regret now the decision taken in 2011? My answer is no. First of all, I was not the Secretary General. I was the Foreign Minister of Egypt at that time, and I voted for the resolution calling for intervention to counteract the threat by Gaddafi to wipe half of Benghazi. That was the request sent to the Security Council. The Security Council, in its working, things changed and resorted to NATO, but the League of Arab States did not ask for that. However, it was very important to help Libya against what might have happened to Libya, and on this one should not regret. What happened after that is that the international community forgot about Libya. Just after the fall of Gaddafi, a delegation from the League of Arab States, I went and I met the leaders. They asked for 3 things. They asked that the League of Arab States help with EU and with the United Nations in attaining 3 matters. First, a ceasefire. Secondly, the building of institutions, including police and the military. They have no institution, 42 years without institution. And thirdly, collection of arms. The international community did not do that, and that is the reason what we see now.
Thank you very much. From Lebanon, Aliyah Mubayed, and also from Barclays Bank.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. I have a question. I couldn't but jump on the opportunity of His Excellency talking about economics and the opportunities that lie within. To ask him about that the fundamental change in the strategic context in the region that happened is what is happening in global oil and gas market, and particularly the implication that this will impose on policy choices, as difficult decisions will have to be made in terms of reallocating resources. The question is basically that the elephant in the room in the Gulf is obviously seen from the market is Saudi Arabia's grappling with these large deficits and its ability to take tough choices to pursue at the same time aggressive defense strategy, external aids to Arab countries in the region, but at the same time to pursue the largesse of its economic policy and the state role of the state in the economy. What constraint do you see the oil prices imposing on your policy choices and moving forward? And to what extent, basically, we could see fundamental changes in policies in Saudi Arabia imposed by this new context in the oil markets?
Thank you very much. Wadida Gagam?
Raghida Dargham, Al Haya and Beirut Institute. About the timing, Mr. Minister Adel Jubeir, about the timing, why are we hearing 18 months to 24 months? Is this the military calendar or is this the political transition calendar? And when the other timing, the timing of the withdrawal of foreign forces, this is probably one of the first times you've sat with your counterpart from Iran, Mohammad Zarif. How did you discuss this? I mean, did they admit, because they normally don't admit that they are there. So did you really discuss it? When do you withdraw? What were the dynamics of the conversation? And lastly, on Yemen, it is encouraging that you keep saying that the conflict has entered its final stage. I know that you said about the Houthis accepting 2216 and the same thing, but what about the role of Russia or the United States or even Iran maybe in facilitating coming closer to that final stage? Is there any such role? Did you get any help in that? Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Karen Young from the U.S.?
Thank you. The question is for Foreign Minister Al-Jubeir. Assistant Secretary Blinken was asked about the U.S. ability to balance commitments in Asia and the Middle East. I think the same question maybe goes to the Arab Gulf states. How will they balance their commitments to Egypt, to Yemen, to Syria, even to Palestine? And this goes along with the question about changing economic situation now. So how are these commitments balanced, and then how are they communicated and delegated among GCC allies? Thank you.
From the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Faisal Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. Question for both. Allow me to hit the nail on the head. This is a security summit and we're discussing the region after the nuclear negotiations. I beg to differ with the foreign minister. Things have changed. This is perhaps the first time there's no U.S. aircraft carrier in the region for maybe 30 years. I'm sure there's enough experts here to correct me if I'm wrong. Mr. Al-Arabi, where are we on the joint Arab military force? How are we going to counter this kind of vacuum which this current American administration has imposed on the region? Surely the solution can't be just simply trusting the good intentions of the Iranians, because they have not shown any. Throughout the negotiations and shortly after, we've been hearing things like Iran has now occupied 4 Arab capitals and such statements. So I just wonder whether or not the unified or the joint Arab task force would be sufficient, and if not, perhaps Mr. Al-Jubeir could answer us what the solutions would be. Is Dir al-Jazeera enough? Is Saudi Arabia, now that we've been through 9 months of war or so, able to fill this vacuum? Thank you.
Thank you. And from the IISS in the U.S., Dr. Dana Allen.
Thank you. To Foreign Minister Al-Jubeir, there's a palpable feeling in this region, and reflected, I think, in the last question, actually, of disappointment and distrust towards the United States among its allies and partners here. I wonder if, Minister, if you could address that disappointment with regard to the possibility that there are actually serious strategic disagreements between among allies. For example, in response to another question, you spoke of increasing military aid to opposition groups in Syria, and you also said in your remarks that Saudi Arabia's absolute requirement is a Syria in which Bashar Assad has absolutely no role. And I think Washington may fear that those two propositions together are a recipe for endless war. So are there serious strategic disagreements with your American partner?
And from the UK and also from the IISS, Professor Toby Dodge.
Thank you, John. My question as well is to Ambassador Jubeir. I think the whole room can agree with you in the need to support the reforms in Hyderabad's reforms in Iraq. But given that there is the possibility of a vote of no confidence in the Iraqi parliament, and indeed his own electoral bloc is pulling support away from him, I suppose I've got two questions. What support can Saudi Arabia give him? But will Saudi Arabia's policy towards Iraq change if Hyderabad is removed?
And I'll just take two more because it's a pretty loaded agenda, especially for Minister Jubeir. From the US, Danny Seabright.
Thank you, John. Foreign Minister Al-Jubeir, the road forward often depends heavily on the journey we've already taken. With regard to the nuclear negotiations, they were conducted in a highly secretive nature without the direct participation of the Arab Gulf states. The P5+1 and Iran provided no seat at the table. How does that fact impact what comes next with regard to implementation? As was commented in the press during the Gulf states leaders' meetings with President Obama at Camp David, the Gulf states have agreed to outsource the implementation of the JCPOA. Is that accurate? If not, what are the Gulf states' key concerns now with regard to implementation going forward, since this is about the nuclear negotiations in the region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last question, Dr. Hisham Helyer from the UK.
Thank you very much. Just a very brief question, but to both of the speakers. There was the question around religious extremism and radical Islamism. My question is very simple. Are we saying that there is no link whatsoever between that extremism and at least some sort of interpretation of religious ideas, and particularly with regards to ideas that have their root within Saudi Salafism, particularly considering the books and the texts that are now being used in places like Raqqa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very good questions and comments. These are the rules of engagement. I'm going to ask Dr. Nabil Al-Arabi to answer the two precise questions asked to him, especially about the Joint Arab Force. Give him 2 minutes to do that. And given the balance of questions, give a solid 6 minutes to Minister Jubeir to answer the plethora of questions addressed directly to him. Nabil Al-Arabi.
Thank you. I was asked a question about the Joint Arab Military Force. Where are we now? This is a legitimate question, of course. As you know, the Arab Summit last March in Sharm el-Sheikh adopted a resolution calling for the establishment. It was a unanimous resolution. Accordingly, there were meetings. Everyone who came, there were 2 meetings for the Chiefs of Staffs, 17, 18, maybe 19 Chiefs of Staff from all over the Arab world, something never happened before. All consider it very, very important. All consider that this is a historic step that should be taken. The African Union has a similar force. The EU has a force. It's in situ. That is to mean that it will not go and meet somewhere and have barracks there. Every country will have in its own country, under its own jurisdiction, whatever they're going to decide that will join this force. The protocol was worked out, which most countries, if not all, were in agreement, but there are still certain points which are under consultation. The general idea was that this force could be used in rapid deployment, in peacekeeping, observation, assisting in humanitarian assistance and deliverance, and also the question of securing maritime routes, or anything else that will be decided by the joint military force, the joint military council, which will be composed of the ministers of defense and the ministers of foreign affairs of the Arab countries. Still, there are matters to be discussed, and the force has not been declared ready yet. I hope soon. Thank you.
Minister.
Yes. These are a large number of questions. I hope I wrote fast enough. I'll try to take them maybe in different order. I'll start with the question that Narida asked about the 18 to 24 months calendar. There are a number of timelines that were put in place. There are some timelines with regards to the time to set up a interim governing council, and some thought that it would take 4 to 6 months. Some thought it could take 1 to 2 months. The challenges you have there is finding the people, agreeing on the people, and then having them take over. Then they have to work on a roadmap for how they're going to implement their work. And then you have to work on how you transfer power gradually from the president to this governing council. And so these things can take time. The thinking was within 4 to 6 months that you should be able to have all of this in place. And the thinking with regards to 18 months had to do with when is the proper time to hold an election in a country such as Syria. The 18 to 20, I haven't heard 24 months, but let's say the 18 to 24 months would have to do with the time that it might take a governing council to draft a constitution, pass the constitution, draft the election laws, work with the international community on administrating those elections, begin the process of reconstruction, begin the process of resettlement of refugees. All of these issues take time. But that latter period, 18 to 24 months, has nothing to do with the departure of Bashar al-Assad. The thinking is that he would leave at the beginning of the process, not at the end of it. So those are the timelines. And I think ultimately those timelines would be subject to what the Syrian leaders will decide based on how quickly they can move those issues, assuming we get to this point. With regards to Yemen, the role of Russia, the US have been very positive. In terms of, with regards to Russia, in terms of pressing the Houthis to accept 2216, and with regards to the United States being supportive in terms of politically, militarily, and logistics and intelligence-wise, the role of Iran has not been so positive. We have stopped a number of vessels that were loaded with arms shipments that the Iranians were trying to send to the Houthis. But ultimately, I think that Iran's role will be much more marginalized than it had been in the past. That's one. Now, the second question with regards to whether things in the region have or have not changed, I think that when I said that things have not changed in the region, the challenges are all the same. The opportunities are all the same. We have had a nuclear agreement with Iran that takes one issue off the table. The relationship with the United States in its strategic sense has not changed. The relationship with the Western powers has not changed. The American presence in the region has in fact increased. Whether an aircraft carrier is withdrawn or not withdrawn, a lot of these decisions have to do also with budgetary issues. The number of American troops and American forces in the region is almost at a record high. And the ability, the decisions that were arrived at between the Gulf countries and the US with regards to military cooperation, with regards to intelligence sharing, with regards to cybersecurity, with regards to ballistic missile defense, with regards to maritime patrols, are all working. And the agreement was made between the leaders of the GCC and President Obama to intensify efforts in those areas, and this effort is ongoing as we speak. We have a number of working groups that are working on implementing these decisions. The releasability of defense technology to the Gulf states is being reviewed with the aim of making it easier and faster to obtain. And so I would say that America's commitment to the security of the Gulf countries, if we measure it by what the US is doing and what the US is providing and what the US and GCC are doing together, is at an all-time high. And so in that sense, this is what I meant by things have not changed, and I wouldn't measure it by one aircraft carrier leaving the Gulf or not. That is, we've had situations in the past where The US had 2 aircraft carriers. Sometimes they replace one with another. And I don't see it as a signal that we, for the time being, may not have an aircraft carrier in the Gulf. We have lots of American aircraft, lots of American ships. And so that's, I think, the relationship on a strategic level has remained strong and is on a footing to grow even wider. And so this brings me to the third point about disappointment in the US. I think people can express opinions about whether or not they like certain policies or certain approaches. But I think at the end of the day, the relationship between the US and the Gulf countries is a historic and strategic one. And it is one that is mutually beneficial, and it is one upon which stability and the security of the region depends. And I think it's a tribute to the strength of the relationship that you can hear people publicly express their frustrations with each other without it having an impact on the realities on the ground and what is happening on the ground. The fact of the matter is, in spite of all the criticism we hear in Washington about the Gulf countries, or in the Gulf countries about Washington, the fact of the matter is the relationship in all areas have grown from strength to strength. Trade and investment is growing. The cooperation in terms of intelligence is growing, in security and counterterrorism in the military field. And so the facts are, the concrete issues are measurable, and we see more strength. We see more consultation and cooperation with regards to dealing with the challenges in the region. We see more consultations when it comes to how we work together to push back on Iran's efforts to destabilize the region in ways that we didn't see years ago. And so I'm very positive about this aspect of it. Now, let me see if I skipped anyone. The issue of the nuclear talks and no direct participation. The talks were really between the P5+1 and Iran, and we were being briefed by the P5 on a regular basis. I remember when I was ambassador in Washington, before every meeting and after every meeting, we were briefed by senior US officials about what was discussed at the talks, the progress that was made, and challenges that remain. And so I don't see this as a negative. The issue of no seat at the table in the implementation of the agreement, we're not nuclear experts, and we're not experts at arms control, and we're not experts at inspections. There is the International Atomic Energy Agency, and there are the P5+1 countries who have the expertise and the knowledge to do this, and the agreement is between them and Iran, and so the responsibility for enforcing that agreement lies with them, not with the Gulf countries. And we are in constant communications with our allies in the West, and as well as in touch with the International Atomic Energy Agency to be briefed on what the implementation will require and how the implementation is moving forward. But it is really the responsibility of the countries that signed the agreement to oversee its implementation. With regards to our policy towards Iraq, we want to have better ties with Iraq. Iraq is a neighboring country. We have historic ties, we have familial ties, we have tribal ties. The security and stability of Iraq is important to the security and stability in the kingdom. We encourage our Iraqi brothers to move towards implementing the reforms. We know it's difficult. It will take time. But as long as they're moving in the right direction, we have decided to open an embassy in Baghdad and a consulate in Erbil. Our diplomats should be arriving in Baghdad and Erbil any day now. And we hope that this will open a new chapter in our relationship with Iraq. The issue of extremism and religion, and the idea of, can I categorically say that what is happening and that it is not linked to religion or Islam, or not linked to what happens in Saudi Arabia or any other place in the world for that matter, I don't think anyone can say this. You can have extremism linked to materialism, you can have extremism linked to idealism, you can have extremism linked to anger at certain policies, you have extremism linked to misinterpretation of religious texts. In every religion, when a settler in the West Bank goes and burns a house with a toddler in it, and he believes he's doing God's work, how different is he from a Daesh person who murders another innocent person? They're the same. one happens to be, claims to be Jewish, the other claims to be Muslim. But at the end of the day, they're both terrorists. And so I think I would look at when I said we need to study the issue of extremism, and violent extremism in particular, my objective was to make the point that this is an issue that is multifaceted. We can't pigeonhole it and say, here's the reason, here's the cause, here's the solution to it. It is much more complicated and much more nuanced than that, and we need to have a more comprehensive approach that is multidisciplinary, that can identify what is it that triggers people to do such terrible crimes, whether they do it in the name of Christianity, whether they do it in the name of Islam, or whether they do it in the name of Judaism, or whether they do it in the name of Hinduism. There is a reason, and there ought to be a way to unlock the solution. And as I mentioned, I'm an optimist, and I'm fairly confident that we will be able to find that solution. Now to the last but not least, and the reason I kept this to the end is because I think this is one of the most important questions asked. The issue of the fundamental change in the region and changes in the oil markets. The countries of the GCC, as I mentioned earlier, have come to the realization a long time ago that free market economies, unleashing the potential of our youth and our business community and our entrepreneurs by streamlining regulations and reducing the role of government in the marketplace is the key to economic growth and prosperity, and by extension stability and security. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we have we're on the tail end of a huge infrastructure development program in terms of airports, roads, hospitals, highways, housing projects, and so forth. And so there was a lot of spending. Over the past 12 years or so, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries have accumulated tremendous financial reserves. And we have a debt to GDP ratio of somewhere around 12%, which is the lowest by far of all the G20 countries. We have an economy that is one of the top 20 economies in the world. We have, like I said, great infrastructure. We have large capital. We have very professional business enterprises. We have a fairly large population. We have attractive laws for foreign investment, and we see it in how foreign investors come into Saudi Arabia. The deficits that the kingdom will be running this year are manageable, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has streamlined its decision-making by putting all of the decision-making that has to do with economics and development into one Economic and Developmental Council, where all the ministries responsible for this area are in one location, and when a decision is made, it's implemented system-wide. This makes decision-making faster, it makes it more efficient, and it ensures that all the relevant ministries are on board. Now, what did this new Economic and Development Council do since it was first initiated after King Salman's ascension to the throne? It is looking at opening up areas for investment. It's looking at managing the kingdom's financial reserves better in order to get better rates of return on our capital. It's looking at streamlining spending. It's looking at making government spending more transparent. It's looking at finding new investment opportunities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's looking at investing Saudi capital abroad. It's looking at things like more efficiencies in energy use. It's looking at things like more efficiencies in water use. It's looking at new areas for investment in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have not even begun to scratch the surface of our mining sector, so now we're looking at doing this. Areas in the field of domestic tourism. All of these areas are going to be doing two things. On the one hand, reducing spending without actually reducing spending, meaning reducing the costs that the government bears for example, we lose a fairly large percentage of water just by leakage of pipes, like every country in the world. Fix the pipes, you have less leakage, you save money. By being more efficient, you can save, and by generating other sources of income you generate income. And so we have no doubt that we will be able to manage this very, very well. And we have no doubt that the growth rates in our economy will continue, and the financial health of the kingdom will remain as strong as it has been. And it is all of these changes were being thought through even before the collapse of the price of oil, because it's the right thing to do, and we can manage very well. And so I have no doubt about this. And how it impacts on our defense strategies and our foreign affairs strategies, I would say very little, because your defense is one of the most essential functions of a government. We are facing many challenges, and we have to make sure that we can confront those challenges. And with regards to foreign aid, it is part of our foreign policy, and the objective is to increase the stability and security in the region by helping our neighbors.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. I think all of us will have concluded two things from this second plenary. The first was that the presentations from this podium were extraordinarily thoughtful and carefully reasoned. Two, I think you will have noticed that there was no QA at this session, no question avoidance, and that all of the points made from the floor were directly addressed by our two plenary speakers. We need to have an abbreviated break at present. We need you to return within 15 minutes, but I hope that you will take 30 seconds before you leave fully to thank this extraordinary speaker this morning. Thank you.